I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist, and in this video, I'm going to share with you some information that I wish I had learned at the beginning of my teaching career and really understood about how the consonant sounds of English work. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, it would mean so much if you did that now, and then also hit the little bell so that you don't miss out on any of the videos that I put out about teaching literacy. Okay, so what we're going to dive into in this video is not stuff that I personally learned in my undergraduate program, nor my master's degree in literacy. I think that things are changing now, and hopefully teachers are getting more of this knowledge, but it's so important to have. And like I said, I wish I had it, at the beginning of my teaching career. What was interesting about my journey with this stuff is, so I do have an undergraduate degree in elementary education. I also have a degree in the Spanish language, culture, history. And so because of that, in Spanish, I had to take this linguistics class. And to be honest, I was not thrilled. I didn't think that it was going to be so interesting or very interesting. And I had to take it, so I took it. And when I later became a bilingual teacher and I was teaching my students who were learning to read and spell in Spanish, when I was teaching my students phonics and just how to read, I understood all of this stuff. And so it was that much easier for me to teach them how to read and spell because I had this knowledge. Now, interestingly, because I've kind of gone back and forth between teaching in English and Spanish and then English, I didn't have that knowledge in English. And so once I switched, so I did English, Spanish, then once I switched back to English, I kind of realized ooh, I don't know this stuff in English and I really need to find it out. Now, I've spoken English all of my life. I know how to read, but that doesn't mean that you have this deeper linguistic knowledge, but it can be so helpful, especially when you work with young students who are just learning how to read and spell and even pronounce some of these sounds correctly. So that's just a little bit about my journey with this. Now let's dive into the consonant sounds. In this video, we're going to really be focusing on the sounds, literally the sounds and how we produce the consonant sounds. Now, consonants are speech sounds, right? And they're formed with the mouth partially closed, obstructing air. So the lips, the teeth, the tongue, one of them, a combination, right? They are obstructing air, which is different from a vowel sound where there's not that level of air obstruction. So that is what a consonant sound is on a very technical level. So it could be the sound the sound th, and you can kind of feel and even see in my mouth how the parts of my mouth are obstructing the air, right? Obstructing the air. Tongue, teeth, those are obstructing the air. So those are the consonant sounds. Obviously much more than and th. Those are just two examples. But in general, consonant sounds are formed by at least a partial obstruction of air. Now, of course, our ultimate goal, even though we're really focusing on the sounds in this video, the ultimate goal is to get our kids to read and spell words using these consonant sounds and other knowledge correctly, right? That's our ultimate goal. Something to know to that end is that there are around 44 phonemes or sounds. Different people will tell you different things, 40 to 50-ish range, right? There is some disagreement, which is so interesting, right? And I think just goes to show how complex our language really is. But let's say for the purposes of this, there's around 44 phonemes, but those sounds, phoneme is an individual sound like sh or t. Those can be represented by different letter combinations. For example, let's take the phoneme, the consonant sound j, okay? That can be spelled by J, like in the word jump. Hear the j, jump. G as in page, right? And DGE as in fudge. That D, G, and E are representing the j sound. So one phoneme, one consonant sound, multiple spellings. That's a little bit of what makes English a bit tricky. Now, I'm curious. I think nowadays, a lot of schools are really moving toward teaching kids to read by teaching them explicitly, which is what we want to do, the relationships between phonemes and graphemes, different ways to spell a sound. So DGE is one grapheme because all these letters are working together to represent J. J is a grapheme, G is a grapheme. But I'm curious, when you were growing up, were you explicitly taught okay, it's this sound and these are the ways to spell it? Let me know if you were taught these phoneme graphing correspondences when you were growing up. Just let me know in the comments if you were. But back to the sounds, because again, we're really just focusing on the sounds and how they are produced for the purposes of this video. Now, what's really interesting about the consonant sounds is that there are a lot of different characteristics that they have. And again, this might not be stuff that you know or have learned before, but it is really helpful because especially when kids are having trouble articulating or producing consonant sounds, or maybe in their spelling, they're confusing certain sounds or spellings for the other, it really helps if we can talk about how to actually produce a sound with your mouth and the characteristics of the sound that they can look for. And this sheet, by the way, that breaks down all of the consonant sounds and, if they're voiced or unvoiced, which we'll talk about in a second, the manner of articulation, and then the place of articulation. This sheet is included in my course, Master the Rules of English Phonics. Link for that in the caption. In that course, we go over this stuff, but so much more, all about the rules of English phonics so that you are truly equipped to teach all of this stuff to your students. Some of it will be teacher knowledge. Some of it will also be student knowledge that you want to make sure that you instruct your students in. One feature of consonant sounds is that they can be voiced or unvoiced. So if you want to figure this out, all you have to do is put your hand on your vocal cords. First, I want you right now, try it with me. I want you to produce the sound S. You can feel nothing really, right? S. You don't feel anything. Now contrast that with the sound for the letter G as in goat, like this. G, G, okay, G. Things are moving. Your vocal cords are turned on, okay? This is a voiced sound. Unvoiced, pretty easy to remember. Your vocal cords are not turned on, like something like P, right? But voiced, you can feel your vocal cords vibrating, like in the sound D. D. You can kind of feel that movement, okay? So voiced or unvoiced. So you can divide all the consonant sounds into either one of those categories, right? Voiced or unvoiced. Now let's talk about manner of articulation, or how these sounds are produced with your mouth and the different pieces of your mouth. There's different types or manners of articulation, and some consonant sounds fall into the category of stop sounds. Now, a stop sound is kind of just what it sounds like. It's articulated by completely stopping the flow of air. So sounds like B or D or G. The air is stopped. And if you do that, if you try those sounds, B, D, G, you will kind of feel how the air is stopping. Notice how I'm trying my best not to say the at the end of the sound, because this really just relates to getting kids to read and spell. If they're reading the word big and you're telling them that the sound for the letter B is ba, then they're going to read it as ba-ig, and that's not the word. So that's why I really try to clip my sounds the best that I can. So those are stop sounds, and there's more stop sounds. I was just giving you some examples. Next up, we have the nasals. These types of consonant sounds are produced with the airstream flowing through the nasal cavity. So you can actually feel it too. If you say the sound for or n, you might be able to feel it flowing through. You can actually kind of feel, the air going through it vibrating a little bit more. So again, the nasals are produced with the airstream flowing through the nasal cavity. Next up, we have the liquids, and these sounds are actually, I think, some of the hardest for kids to master. Like l or as in red, right? I know different people have different ways of pronouncing the sound for the letter R. The goal is not to put too much of a vowel sound before it, like right? We don't want to have that vowel sound right before it. So as clipped as we can, right? So anyway, liquids, and those are produced so that the tongue partially but not fully closes off the mouth. Liquids. Next up are the glide sounds. Now the glide sounds are unique because when you produce these or pronounce them, it's part of a word where a vowel sound is going to follow. So it glides immediately into the vowel sound without any like friction or stopping of the air, okay? So to illustrate this, I want you to think about the word, we'll do yellow, right? Yellow. You'll notice how it just glides from that sound, yellow, right? The Y goes straight into the E. So the Y sound for Y, and that's a little different than what you might have heard, because the way I was originally taught, the Y would represent the sound Y, right? And sometimes when we say Y, it has that sound in it. And so a closer representation of the sound for the letter Y is Y, because like yellow, yet, right? Words like that, it just kind of glides in, okay? Now, one thing to know is that every single sound that we say, whether it's me or somebody else, when you actually read the sound in a word, it is influenced by the letters that come before and or after it. So when I say a phoneme, I'm trying to isolate the phoneme to its purest form, but the reality is that that phoneme may sound different in different words because of a phenomenon called co-articulation. I didn't plan to talk about that in this video. I do cover it more in my course, which again, information on the course is in the caption, but just so that you know, when we're teaching kids sounds, yes, we try to get to the purest form, but we also have to realize that because of co-articulation, sometimes the sound in an actual word is going to vary a little bit, and that's okay. We just kind of have to teach our kids to be flexible. But coming back to our main concept of a glide sound, again, the consonant sound is immediately gliding into a vowel sound. So W as in wet, Y as in yellow. Those are two examples of glide sounds. Next, we have the fricative sounds. Those are produced with friction. I just think the name is funny, but it makes sense, right? Friction, fricative. Friction or a hiss by narrowing the flow of air that's coming out of the mouth. So for example, the sound F, you can kind of tell there's like that hissing, right? S, it's another hiss. Those are examples of fricatives. And then last we have the affricats. Affricats are articulated as a stop sound before a fricative. So I actually feel like this is pretty easy to feel in your mouth. If you make the sound for the letter J, you can actually feel how it's kind of stopping the air, and then there's like the fricative. So J, try doing that, or ch, right? You can actually feel the stop sound coming first before the fricative, okay? So those are the manners of articulation: stop, nasal, liquid, glide, fricative, affricate, okay? All consonant sounds are gonna fall into one of those categories. And the reason why I think this is so useful is because it helps us describe what the sound should be like when we're getting kids to pronounce sounds appropriately. We want to get them to produce and pronounce the sounds as well as possible. Now, I know that some kids have speech issues, articulation issues, which get in the way, but we want to focus on that because as accurate as they can be, that will help them read and spell words the most accurately. Now we've talked about voicing, we've talked about manner of articulation. There's also some more information about place of articulation that I cover in my course. Again, link is in the caption, but I want to talk about these pairs of sounds. So there are certain sounds that will have the same manner and even the same place of articulation, meaning like the pieces of your mouth are moving in the same way to form these sounds. And the only difference is whether they are voiced or not, with the vocal cords vibrating. So this is really interesting. Let me show you a list of these pairs. Okay, so I want to encourage you to actually say these sounds after I do. So I'll say the pair and then I'm going to pause so that you can say the sounds. And I want you to notice how your mouth is moving in the same ways for both of these sounds. But the difference, and you can place your hand on your throat, is the voicing, right? So B, P, B. Try it. Okay, next we have D and T. Notice the difference, notice which one is voiced. Next we have F and V, V. Next we have G, K. So try that. And then we have S, Z, right? That one, I think you can really feel the difference between the unvoiced S and the voiced Z. Now there's more. There's Ch and J. There is F as in thin and Th as in them, right? I just couldn't fit them all on the board. I do go over them all in my course, but this is helpful to know because if you have a child who is perhaps pronouncing a sound incorrectly or pronouncing a word incorrectly, it might just be that they need to turn their vocal cords on or off, and you can help them do that because you can explain, hey, you should not feel your vocal cords buzzing for the sound S or whatever, right? So super helpful. Okay, so that was just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to know, yes, about the consonant sounds, but even about like the phonics skills that you would teach in a scope and sequence. When do you teach them, right? Do you teach like all of the vowel spellings for one vowel sound at once, or do you do some of them later? What are all the different ways to spell like the long A? Things like that. There's just a lot to know. And again, a lot of this stuff is just, you know, I wish I had known it early on in my teaching career. But of course, we don't always have the training and everything we need to know in education, which, you know, sometimes is frustrating, but sometimes it's fun too, because there's just so much to learn. And I feel like learning helps you stay engaged in your job because you're always growing. So if you want to learn more about the rules of English phonics and, you know, some tricks and tips to teach the different phonics skills, definitely check out my course. This is for teachers who are teaching kindergarten, first, second, third, or fourth grade. It's most applicable to them. And if you're like a reading specialist or some other teacher, even an English language learner teacher, multilingual learner teacher who works with these kinds of things, the course would also be very helpful for you. So check out the course in the caption. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was helpful. Before you leave, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.